Here we will discuss modern homes that are built on flat lots and that are already bolted. Their earthquake resistance can be doubled with a retrofit. This house was built with half-inch bolts spaced every 6 feet on the entire perimeter foundation. We know this is true because when it was built, the city it was built in had adopted the Uniform Building Code, which has required bolting since 1935. One of the ways we know this house does not have a cripple wall is the fact that it only has 1 or 2 steps that lead into the front door. The red arrow points to the floor that you walk on. The blue arrow points to the top of the foundation. In between is the floor framing that supports the entire house. The purpose of our retrofit is to attach this floor framing to the foundation so that in an earthquake it does not slide off the foundation. The red arrows represent earthquake forces trying to push the house off the foundation. On the left, you can see the earthquake force is trying to push the end joist and the mud sill off the foundation, but the mud sill is restrained from movement by the bolts. On the right-hand side, we see the earthquake force pushing against the rim joist, the floor joist, and the mud sill. Again, the bolts are restraining the mud sill from movement. As we will see, even though our house is already bolted, we will discover that on 2 sides of the house we don't have enough bolts. Our retrofit will consist of adding bolts to these 2 sides. In addition, in our retrofit, we need to make sure that the end joist, the floor joist, and the rim joist do not slide off of the mud sill. This is the second and a very important part of our retrofit. In 1935, the Uniform Building Code started requiring houses be bolted with a half-inch bolt on the entire perimeter of the foundation. Even though it was in the building code, the history of the building code had just started and very few municipalities had adopted it. Adoption of the code took many years and was on a piecemeal basis. So it is important that you call your building department and ask them when your city adopted the Uniform Building Code. If it had already been adopted when your home was built, you can be sure your house is bolted with a half-inch bolt spaced every 6 feet. It is my personal experience, after looking at thousands of homes, that homes built after 1957 are generally bolted. This rectangle represents a perimeter foundation of a home that has been bolted with a bolt every 6 feet. As you can see, when this happens, we only have half the number of bolts on the 2 short walls as on the long walls. So here we have 4 bolts on the short walls and 8 bolts on the long walls. That means that the 2 short foundations are only half as resistant to earthquakes as the 2 long foundations. The earthquake force represented by the green arrow is resisted by the bolts on the 2 short foundations. The earthquake force represented by the red arrow is resisted by the bolts on the long foundations. In our retrofit, we want to make sure that the 2 short foundations are just as strong as the 2 long foundations by adding additional bolting. Doing this will make the house twice as earthquake resistant as it was before. The red lines here represent foundation anchors which, as discussed previously, function to bolt the mud sill to the foundation. We are installing 4 foundation anchors here because each foundation anchor has the strength of 1 bolt. So when we are done, we have the equivalent of 8 bolts on the 2 short foundations. We have 8 bolts on the 2 side foundations. So now this house is equally bolted on all sides and is twice as strong as it was before. As shown previously, This illustrates how the end joist can slide on top of the bolted mud sill. This movement is prevented by the installation of shear transfer ties. So why is it that the end joists tend to slide on top of the mud sill even in newer bolted homes? Since 1971, the building code has required that the end joists be nailed to the mud sill with just 3 nails. This is the case even today. The average end joist to mud sill connection will be required to resist at least 5,000 pounds of earthquake force in the event of a large earthquake. These 3 nails can only resist 360 pounds of earthquake force. For this reason, on every house, including those built as of today, must have shear transfer ties installed to resist that force. Even if your house was built today, it is quite possible that the connection between the end joist and your mud sill can only resist 360 pounds of earthquake force. This is because a house can be built this way and be fully code compliant. This is a photograph of how the end joist is attached to the mud sill with shear transfer ties. As with everything else, we use the base shear formula to figure out how many shear transfer ties we need. The fact that a new house can be built with only 3 nails attaching to the end joist to the mud sill is a clear oversight in the building code. As a member of the International Code Council, I am currently working to have this code provision changed. However, it will probably take many years. Again, the code requires that each floor joist be nailed to the mud sill with 3 nails. As you can see here, where the joists run perpendicular to the foundation and to the mud sill, each joist will receive 3 nails. This is more than adequate to resist our anticipated earthquake force. We need not worry about the rim joists, because if the floor joists do not move, the rim joists won't move either. Here's a photograph of the joist sitting on top of the mud sill and the foundation when the floor joists run perpendicular to the foundation. Each one of these joists will have 3 nails attaching it to the mud sill. You can assume each one of the joists on your house has these 3 nails unless it was built before December of 1971, in which case you should check. This is a photograph of some shear transfer ties that have been installed to attach the end joists to the mud sill. It also shows a foundation anchor that has been added to strengthen the connection of the mud sill to the foundation. Again, we only need to do this on the 2 short foundations so that we can make them equally strong as the 2 long foundations. The black lines here represent shear transfer ties. Shear transfer ties attach the end joist to the mud sill. We install 2 shear transfer ties for every bolt and 2 shear transfer ties for every new foundation anchor. When we are all done, the strength of our connection with the shear transfer ties will equal the strength of our connection with the bolts, and we now have a complete retrofit that will make sure this home stays on its foundation and it is twice as strong as it was before.